The Scottish Government has taken steps to advance race equality and tackle racism, but to be frank and absolutely honest, we have not gone far enough. And
let's just give this a bit of context here. This solidarity with anti-racism debate that was conducted in the Rainbow Unicorn Parliament the other day. When they refer to inequality, they're referring to disparities. When they refer to racism, they're referring to disparities. Now, on paper, Scotland, the last census was 96% white. Now, out of that 96%, I don't recall how much is actually of a Scottish background and how many people make up that 96 from other European countries or another country within the United Kingdom. But the fact of the matter is that at least 4 measly percent that are classified as from an ethnic minority persuasion. So it stands to reason that the majority of public life, whether that be elected officials or whether that be top-notch jobs at the CEOs and police chiefs, etc., are going to be held by white individuals, Scottish or from elsewhere. So to consider the fact that Scotland on that basis is racist due to inequality is nonsensical for the most part, laughable and stupendous, but above all else, incorrect. Now, the solution to crack down and quell said racism and said inequality is to fiddle and meddle and manipulate in order to achieve outcome equality. Not equality of opportunity, no, outcome, because the outcomes currently signify racism, apparently. Sorry.
And we need to make much greater progress. In 2017, we published a Race Equality Action Plan outlining actions we will take over the course of this Parliament to secure better outcomes for minority ethnic communities in Scotland.
Better outcomes.
An update published last year indicated that while progress had been made in some areas, there remains so much.
By pressurising businesses and political parties, etc., to prioritise people that they consider BAME. So positive discrimination, if you really want to call it that, it's discrimination. If anything, going by their own namby-pamby definitions and widening of goalposts, it's racist. Fuck off.
Much more to do, and a senior level programme board has been established to drive the progress we all want to see.
Who's we?
In the last financial year, we allocated £2.6 million to fund organisations working to advance race equality. We have taken action to address bullying and discrimination in our schools, still a work in progress, and we have a working group to take forward measures to address underrepresentation of minority ethnic teachers in Scotland's schools.
Underrepresentation. This is another one that gets on my nerves, because if you read enough of their crap or if you listen to enough of them spew this stuff out, you come to a consensus that they're implying ethnic minority students learn better if they've got an ethnic minority teacher in the vicinity. Now, by that logic, then that should expand to white students. Scottish students, by their own logic, should learn better and be able to cope and whatnot and feel better with a Scottish teacher. But that's not good enough. That's unacceptable, because that would signify a little bit of white consciousness. We can't be having that here in Rainbow Unicorn Land. So ethnic minorities have to have ethnic minority teachers purely for the fact they're both from an ethnic minority background.
The employment rates of minority ethnic groups in Scotland, and our Workforce Equality Fund has funded initiatives to support minority ethnic people to progress within the workplace and employers to develop a more inclusive workforce.
So in other words, positive discrimination, diversity quotas, yeah, got it. This is the same overweight, four-eyed feminist who spends 99% of her time chantering on about how oppressed women are. Good to know that she's on the bandwagon of how oppressed blacks are. Doesn't stop them trying their damnedest to import as many blacks into the country every single year as humanly possible. Why they would want to come to little racist Scotland is quite beyond me. But maybe it's quite appealing to know that every MP in that parliament, regardless of what's in between their legs, seems to have an infatuation when it comes to pandering, grovelling and fucking bootlicking for everybody they consider oppressed.
Actions that are going to make a difference, not just words. And let me share some examples. Every chief executive of every council and every government department, white. Every director of a department in Scotland, white. Every principal of a college or university in Scotland, white. Every head teacher in Scotland, white. Every chair of a public sector body in Scotland, white. Every High Court judge in Scotland, white. Every prison governor in Scotland, white. Every editor of a news organisation in Scotland, white. Why?
Because Scotland is 96% white. But you see what's going on here? We have ethnic minorities and their little lackeys from the Rainbow Unicorn Party, as well as the Labour Party and the Green Party, all pandering for the same agenda. Or on behalf of the same agenda, I should say. Why does this man care so much that every aspect of society in a white predominant country has a white person at the top of said ladder? If it's all about diversity being a strength, if it's all about us all being one, skin colour doesn't matter, why do we have Muslims in our parliament, who by the way wouldn't be there if our country was so fucking racist, sitting there and complaining that there's too many Scottish people, let's just say, in positions of power? Why does that bother him? Can people not understand and put two and two together, or even more on that, read between the lines here? They have an issue that there's too many white people in certain positions of quote-unquote power in this country. But if you flip that on its head and somebody complains that there's too much ethnic minorities in specific sectors of society, whether that be TV representation or via their fucking diversity quotas, they're a racist. Very good to hide your racism under the mask of anti-racism.
Is it because we don't have the talent?
No, it's because it's 96% or was white. It's really that simplistic. But this is what's going to continue to happen. And then when the tables turn as the demography continuously and continues to shift, what's going to happen in time is they're going to throw the exact same answer back at the likes of me when we complain about the lack of white representation. It's ludicrous. It's because there was 96, roughly, let's just say 90% now, I don't know what it is, but 90% of the country is white. So I don't really understand what you're hoping for. Anything other than the odd black person in noticeable positions of power would be questionable. And as for this talk of representation continuously being brought up, they want people in positions of power to represent, or ethnic minorities in positions of power to represent ethnic minorities. So they want Muslims to represent Muslims, they want blacks to represent blacks. Where is the representation for white people in that parliament? It's not enough to just say that they're white, therefore they're represented, because quite clearly there ain't anybody in that parliament from this 2.5 hour rough video advocating for the well-being of white people. There never is in this parliament, because all they do is piss taxpayers' money away on more bullshit relating to social justice and ethnic minority hardship, quote unquote. And how does the lack of black teachers or lack of black councillors or lack of black police chiefs indicate racism? How does that indicate anything other than what it is on paper? 96% roughly, or 90 whatever, it stands to reason that the bulk of positions in this country are going to be held by white people. And the fact that that is a problem to the people in this government, the fact that they are spending millions year on year to change that, should tell you all you need to know about the people that you vote in year on year, the people that claim to represent you. They couldn't give a shit about you. This is what happened. Diversity is a strength, yeah? Fuck, man.
Because we don't have the ability, or is it because that the opportunity doesn't exist?
Oh yeah, well why are you standing there? Why are you standing there? You fucking people, man.
Christina McKelvey and indeed what Patrick Harvey have already said, that we urge people to protest using digital means and other methods which do not include mass gatherings outdoors. Let me also say to the number of members who address the issue of hate crime data and having disaggregated data, that I agree with the point that you make. I raised it and had a good discussion with Bemis and some other racial equality organisations recently.
What have you got to do with black people, may I add? You're a Muslim. We're going to talk about the Arab slave trade, no we're not. But this talk of hate crimes is another one, courtesy of the likes of him. Every group that is considered a protected character, has a protected characteristic or is a protected group, they're all protected under the guise of hate crime protections, bar white people. Real equality. Real fucking equality, Hamza.
If it wasn't for the pandemic, this month would have seen some work on that being put forward and brought forward by Police Scotland, and I'll re-engage with Police Scotland about when we can bring forward disaggregated data, because the points
all these bogus reports that never lead to convictions
that have been made about data, having information, are hugely, hugely important.
Oh, white man looked at me funny.
Presiding Officer, I will start this speech and end it in the same way.
Your eyes, Paul. You ready for this? This is a great little performance here from Hamza Yusuf.
To say that I'm angry. I'm angry that in 2020 we're once again confronted with scenes of horrific racial injustice. I'm angry that in 2020 we're still...
What did George Floyd's death have to do with racism? Absolutely nothing. There's one group of people that I'm aware of that have been the most unforgivable throughout all this, apart from the American Democrats. It's the SNP. And I don't just say this with bias in mind. I say this because they have ran with the narrative from day dot that this was race related to justify the continual agenda that they had in the background regarding race equality. All these things that they had in the pipeline previously are now starting to come into fruition. Like the Social Justice Commission and all this money that they've been pumping into organisations and schemes to rectify the inequalities in Scotland on racial grounds. It's all coming into fruition now. It's the justification that they needed. But they've also indirectly as well as directly endorsed the protests. They've indirectly as well as directly parted the narrative that's false, that this was race related, and this is the end product. We have them all in Parliament standing there with Hamza Yusuf pretending to cry as if this really affects him. What does the death of a black man have to do with Hamza Yusuf's hardship? Nothing. Nothing at all. But it looks good.
Dealing with overt racism, with subtle racism, with institutional racism, with structural racism. Whichever form it takes,
it's still... Isn't it, Hamza? The anti-racist campaigner, Hamza Yusuf, that believes whiteness is the problem. A Muslim in Scotland believes whiteness is the problem. Now here's this fake cry performance and the media have already lapped it all up. This is what you vote for, this is what you get. And I'm at a point now where I think you deserve it if you keep voting for this shit.
Still racism. You may well think that as time has moved on that racism has declined, that manifestations
but you keep talking about it, it's going nowhere.
Overt racism are no longer
Have you got these names for overt, inverted,
in place? I'm afraid that's not the case.
Of course, because you're
presiding officer. I don't have to cast my mind back particularly far. I suspect the same is true for Anas, to somebody calling me a Paki. Don't even start me on my Twitter timeline, which is frankly a cesspit of racism. I'm angry, presiding officer, because in this day and age, we're still...
Anonymous accounts on Twitter really do amplify the bigger picture of racism.
Telling people of colour to go home. Brian Whitlam, what I thought was a really excellent contribution, says that he remembers a time in a bygone era when he would see casual racism on the TV. He doesn't have to go back to a bygone era, presiding officer. I heard it just yesterday. I saw a video clip yesterday of the social commentator and author Afua Hirsch on a panel chaired by LBC's Nick Ferrari.
Oh, God.
She explained her views of needing to confront the racism of figures in British history. And Nick Ferrari's response was, if you don't like Britain, which is her home, why do you stay? He would simply not have asked that question if a white person was sitting in the chair.
Because they're indigenous. You're not. You people have a major livelihood on complaining about racism. Afua Hirsch too. All you do is complain about racism in this country. All you do is complain about the wrongs of this country. You especially have a homeland. You call yourself a Pakistani Scot. You can't sit in our country and continuously berate the natives, berate our history and berate our country, and especially in your case, dickhead. You think Muslims, you think Islam has a pretty history? So what? Because you're from an ethnic minority background, you get away with slamming our history and slamming our country continuously and hiding behind the excuse that it's your home too. Well, if it's your fucking home, pal, why don't you act like it?
But people of colour are still fair game when it comes to racism.
And how was that racist?
Forget the racial jibes. Forget the slurs that we still have to put up with.
All the time.
Racism is literally killing minorities, as we have all seen and we have all referenced. But as everybody has mentioned, racism doesn't just exist in the United States. The events in the United States force us to hold a mirror up to ourselves and to confront the racism that exists here. The unconscious, the subtle, the overt, the institutional, the structural.
They've got names for all of them. It's brilliant.
On all of these fronts.
And only we're capable of these things, yeah? They're not.
Scotland is not immune.
Oh, God.
Presiding officer, this is the part where we should all begin to feel uncomfortable. Because we have to accept the reality and the
George Floyd died. And that makes us racist.
evidence in front of us that Scotland has a problem of structural racism. As people have mentioned, take this Parliament as an example. Over 300 MSPs have come and gone out of this Parliament, our nation's Parliament, and in 20 years, not a single black member of the Scottish Parliament. Our shame.
You mean
not a single
shame? In 2001, the population of Scotland that was considered from an ethnic minority background was 2%. 2%. Then 4 in 2011. It's simple mathematics.
Single female woman of colour, to our shame. And the only 4 ethnic minority MSPs have all been Scots Asian males. And take Anas and
Asian males. Scottish people are an ethnicity. This is what they're doing, folks. They're erasing who we are. Every aspect of our society, they are erasing.
We're hardly even diverse between us. Both male, both born and raised in Glasgow's south side, both in our mid-30s, both went to the same private school.
And why do we need a brown woman in here, or a black woman in here, to indicate equality? Why does this stuff supposedly matter that much?
Both middle class. Our fathers even come from the same region in Pakistan.
Oh, like that.
His father happens to be the governor of that region. My dad didn't quite get it. The Conservatives, the Greens, the Liberal Democrats.
And how many whites are in positions of power over there in Pakistan?
They've never had a single person of colour make up their ranks in 20 years of devolution. I don't say that to point the finger.
Yes, you do.
I say that because you know we have to make change. They've never had a single MP from Scotland that has been non-white in their history. And to my colleagues on the government bench, we know that we are not immune either. Some people were surprised. They were taken aback even by the mention on my social media that 99% of the meetings I go to, I'm the only non-white person in the room. But why are we so surprised when the most senior positions in Scotland are filled almost exclusively by those who are white?
So what we're getting at here is then, because all senior roles in this country are held by white people, the implication is that's why the majority of people in other positions of power are white. So to rectify that issue, we put brown and black people into senior roles in order for them to personally hire people who are not brown and black and put them into positions of power. That's the implication that we're getting here. They want power, not equality.
My portfolio alone. The Lord President, white. The Lord Justice Clerk, white. Every High Court judge, white. The Lord Advocate, white. The Solicitor General, white. The Chief Constable, white. Every Deputy Chief Constable, white. Every Assistant Chief Constable, white.
Look at the way he says that, with venom in his voice, essentially.
Head of the Law Society, white. The head of the Faculty of Advocate,
Vitriol, white.
White. Every prison governor, white. And not just justice. The Chief Medical Officer, white. the chief nursing officer, white, the chief veterinary officer, white, the chief social work advisor, white. Almost every trade union in this country headed by people who are white. In the Scottish Government, every Director General is white. Every chair of every public body is white. That is not good enough. I don't doubt that if I looked across the private sector, that black and minority ethnic people would similarly be underrepresented at senior levels. This is a collective failure on every single one of us. So I hope we're sitting uncomfortably, because these should be uncomfortable truths for us all.
Fuck you.